Okay. Are you
We can play a game.
you need to play a game, could we? Are you guys managing?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
What note? Yeah, just put it safe up. Yeah. All right. Good morning. Okay, so thank you for everyone that filled out the forms. I saw there's quite a wide need. So in today's talk about communication, I'm going to really be zooming out. So we are zooming out and taking a kind of bird's eye view of communication. We're low tech, so Rowan helped me make it pretty. She said it was boring. So you guys have some original artworks from my daughter here. But we're going to really try and have a bit of an overview of communication today. Everything that I'm saying, I am going to send you guys as well. Okay. Alright, so if you have a look at communication, the Prompt Institute in America gave us this beautiful framework, and they divide communication into three main areas, which is sensory motor, social emotional, and cognitive linguistic. So today we are going to use this framework to have a look at communication as a whole, but specifically in children with autism. Alright, so we're going to start off with the cognitive linguistic communication, and cognitive being our thinking and linguistic being language. So this is kind of the in the brain languagey side of communication. There are two ways that children can learn language. We have the analytic way, which is our traditional understanding of language development. And this is where a child will learn a single word, mama, and then learn two words, mama come, and then learn 3 words, and then 4, and then grammar, and then they're speaking. And most people sitting here probably learned language in that way. Most neurotypical people also learn in that way. But we also have a different way, which is called Gestalt language learning. Okay, Americans say Gestalt, British say Gestalt, I can't decide. So this kind of language learning is quite typical for children that are on the spectrum, and it's a different way of learning language. It's where we learn language in chunks, in bigger chunks first, and then it actually mitigates down to single words. So I tried to represent this visually to make it make a bit more sense. Alright, here we go. It's okay. Oh, I put too much press stick. I'm sorry. My lovely assistant will help me. Alright, so if we look at the Gestalt language development, it looks a little different. Okay, so on the first level, a child learns a whole language Gestalt. So this is like learning wheels on the bus go round and 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 round. And that is the solid thing in the child's brain. So every time the child sees a bus, child might sing wheels on the bus go round and round and round and round and round and round. And this kind of exists on its own. The second stage is where they actually start segmenting a Gestalt. So they might break the song up. Wheels on the bus go round and round, all through town. Okay, it's becoming a little bit smaller. The pieces are becoming a bit smaller. At the third level, they start isolating single words or making 2-word combinations. Now they see a bus and they can say bus. Or they can say school bus. Alright, so you can see it's going from the big to the small. And then from stage 4, it starts going bigger again. They're actually able to combine smaller pieces to make original phrases and sentences. The bus is coming. Alright? At stage 5, we start getting a bit more grammar coming. The bus is coming early today. Now you can see it's getting longer. And at stage 6, we start with original sentences with a complete grammar system. Why is the bus late today? It was early yesterday. this looks quite different, right, to the expected language development. But it's very valid, and we need to honor it as well. So the way that this develops is through something called echolalia. Echolalia is where a child will repeat the last thing that they've heard. We first get immediate echolalia, so maybe while we're singing Wheels on the Bus, they might sing it with us. And then we get delayed echolalia or scripting. So this is where a child might look at your phone and say, the phone is locked. It's something that they've heard in the past and they're now bringing it back. Our job is to put on our investigator hats and figure out what meaning the delayed echolalia has, because it has a meaning. Something that's interesting about the Gestalt language processing is that there's a theory that it's related to Gestalt processing in general, which is where a child, usually with autism, remembers an entire situation. So if they see a bus, they might actually remember the feeling of sitting in the car, the smells around them, seeing that bus come by, hearing the sounds, what they were feeling in that moment, if they were hungry. And that entire experience can actually come back to the child again when they see that bus. All right, it's very interesting. We need to then figure out the meaning behind it for our children and then help them to actually isolate, to get to these stages of spontaneous language. So a lot of people might think, oh, my child is verbal. They are speaking a lot because they're copying a lot of what I'm saying, but they might actually still be in these earlier stages and not yet with the spontaneous language. And this is our goal. This is what we are working towards. But it's wonderful to be in a position with young children where we can help them through all of these stages. Okay. At this point, I think it's important to mention modeling. So children learn language through language models. They hear it from us, and then they speak it, all right? Unfortunately, a lot of times children hear it from TV, or they hear it from screens, or they hear it from apps, or they hear it from games. And if we are looking at children with autism specifically, we know that they have these RRBs, these very specific interests, and very often it's letters and it's numbers and it's shapes and it's dinosaurs. So we have these very specific interests, and if we are only exposing our children to the letters, they will only be saying the letters. We'll have children that can name the alphabet, we'll have children that can count, but they cannot tell us when they need the bathroom and cannot tell us that their stomach is sore. Alright, so if we look at echolalia and we look at this kind of processing, it actually makes it extremely important for us to make sure that we are modeling a wide range of language. We've got verbs in there, we've got action words, we've got feeling words, we've got all the nouns, that we're not letting them be stuck on a device where they are kind of just passively taking in their specific interest the whole time, but actually exposing them to a lot more. Okay.
I want to just add in there, that's also why we have theme-based learning, because we want to encourage functional speech and communication, and we want to expand that. So if we're only doing numbers and colors and the alphabets, that's all that's going to happen. That's why we're learning about the ocean, we're learning about my home, we're learning about family. We're expanding that, exposing the children to a wide variety of language options. And we really want to encourage you. That's why I put on that group every time what we're doing, so that you can have those conversations and speak about it, and the children are hearing those words and those songs throughout the day. Because we know they're learning, most of them are learning in big chunks of their language.
Yeah, most of the children that we have here at this stage are Gestalt language processors. And we see, especially, they stop at songs. I love songs. We need to use the songs. That's how we're going to get the kids talking, is we need to use the songs. Okay. When we are modeling their when we are modeling, there are some things we can do that can help our children to actually take in the language that we're saying. I don't know. I'm coming back. Alright, so the Hannah Center gives us the 4 S's, which is wonderful because this really works. Alright? So we have to say less and stress, go slow and show. And we have to repeat this very often. Okay, so the say less does not mean do not speak. It means that we cannot overload a child's brain with lots and lots of language, alright? I'm not going to say, okay, listen, it's 5 to 8, it's time to go, please go get your bag. The child's going to look at you like, what? You're going to say, let's go. Alright, we're condensing it to the level of your child. Obviously, if you have a child who is very verbal, yes, you can have that whole sentence. If your child is still kind of figuring out this whole language thing, you're not going to overwhelm them with very long sentences. Okay. Stress is not like work stress. This is voice stress, vocal stress. So depending on what you want to teach your child, I'm going to say it's the blue ball. It's the blue ball. So I'm just going to make my intonation go a little higher. I'm going to say it a little louder. I'm going to use my voice to help the child's hearing kind of make sense of the important bit of the information that I'm giving right now. It doesn't help if you speak this fast as well as too fast. We don't need to speak this slow either. Okay? But just like a tiny bit slower than you would normally is usually good. Okay? It's just giving the brain a little bit more time to process the language. Alright? And this one is extremely important, is showing. So in general, children's visual systems are usually a bit stronger than their auditory systems. It's just an observation. So if we can show them visually what we mean, we're connecting meaning for them to the language. So if I just say put on your shoes, you might not know what I mean, but if I say put on your shoes, it's much easier. Alright, if I lift up their shoes, I say put on your shoes. We're going to talk a bit later about alternative and augmentative communication, and there's a lot of pointing to pictures and things. But the idea is to let the visual system help the auditory system to make sense of the language. Alright. And repeating often, I cannot stress this enough, it's boring for you, it's not boring for your child. Okay? We need to keep repeating the same words over and over again, because a lot of children with a language delay might need more repetition than children without. Alright, so that is our cognitive linguistic side. If we move then to the social emotional side of communication, this is a core feature of autism. So you do get some children with autism that might have normal language, normal speech, but struggle with this. You get children that might struggle in all 3 areas or in 2 areas, but this will always be a core feature of autism. We need it for the diagnosis. So in terms of social, emotional, social communication development, there we go. The Helen Center has given us 4 beautiful stages of development, and the old parents will know this, I'm sorry, it's boring. But this is kind of how children with autism are expected to develop in terms of their social communication skills. Alright, so we start off with our explorers, and we do have a few explorers with us in school at the moment. And an explorer is someone who sends messages to tell us what they want and what they don't want, but the message is not intentionally directed at another person. The message is through their behavior. The message is through their body, but they're not directing it. So the adults in their lives really have to guess and kind of figure out what it is that the child wants right now, all the time. Okay? Once we move from the explorer, we become a requester. And this is where there's like a light bulb that goes off of, haha, I can send a message to another person and get something. So it's still very much directed towards their needs and what they want and what they kind of require right now, but they're aware of this other person that can help them get it. So now a child might take your hand and put it on something that they want. Or they might take a toy and give it to you as a way of showing, I want you to help me with this toy. Or they might make quick eye contact to show you that they want something. So they're starting to make requests, not necessarily always with words yet. Sometimes it is still with their body quite a bit. But later in the requester stage, we get to words and signs and pointing to pictures as well. After the requester stage, we get the early communicator stage. And this is like where they level up a bit and realize that they can use communication to socially connect with others. Now they're greeting you, they're answering some questions. There's a bit more of a to and fro starting to happen. They're making comments and kind of just sharing their world with someone else through communication. And then we get to the final stage, which is our partner stage. And this is where a child is able to have conversations. And this is the stage where children are able to speak about the past, speak about the future, speak about their feelings, speak about things that are not here right now. So this is really a more advanced stage. I don't think we have anyone in this stage right now, but we do have quite a few early communicators that are quite close. So we can help our children move through these stages. Wait, I need to say one thing before I say how to help. There's one more thing, sorry. On top of this, Hannon, so this is from the More Than Words program that Hannon gives. They have a different program called Learning Language and Loving It, which talks about conversation styles. So in your mind, your child is now in one of those levels, right? But they also have a specific style of conversing, which is personality-based. So we get what we call the sociable child, which is a child that easily initiates and easily responds. Okay? It kind of comes easily to them. And we do have kids, we do have sociable kids with us. Then we get the reluctant child. The reluctant child will respond when you ask them something or when you start interacting, they'll respond to you, but they won't necessarily out of their own initiate and come and like communicate with you. They're a bit more reserved, all right, but they will still respond. Then we get the child with their own agenda, which is not to be confused with the old More Than Words own agenda stage. This is something different. This is a child, my daughter was like this when she was little, that will ignore you and not respond if you ask them something, but will initiate when they want to. All right, so they'll come out on their own and kind of, when they want to, they will communicate, but not necessarily respond when you communicate to them. We have a lot of these kids. And then we get the passive child. And the passive child finds it extremely difficult to respond to people and to initiate. All right. This is basically just a bit of a framework for us to see, okay, we need to create more opportunities for responses. Or we need to stop giving instructions because this child is not initiating. We need to wait and give them more opportunities to initiate. So knowing this about your child really helps to know what are we focusing on to try and grow communication as a whole. All right. In terms of the social emotional communication side, a couple of things that we can do to help our children develop this. The most important one is connection. Okay, so without connection, there is no communication. Communication only occurs within the context of two or more people. It doesn't help you speak to yourself. Okay, I mean, I speak to myself, I speak to my dogs. But you kind of need another person to speak to, all right? So we need connection. We need to be down on our child's level so that they can see our faces, so that they can be close to us. All right? We need to develop joint attention skills, and this is really important. We are constantly focusing on this at school. So joint attention, Nadine might speak about this, she does. Not today. Okay. So with joint attention, we want the child to be able to focus on the same thing as us. Initially, it's focusing on us. So it's a person and a person, and we can focus on each other. And then we bring in a third thing, maybe a toy, maybe a book, that we can both focus on the same thing together, all right? And that develops the social communication skills. We need to honor any communication attempts, right? If it's not a sound, if it's not a word, it's okay, because especially at those early stages, we want that click. We want them to realize, when I gave this, something happened. When I pointed to this, something happened. When I cried, something happened. And then we give the words for them. So we say, oh, you're upset. I see, you want the yogurt. Okay, so we're giving them the words, but we're not giving them what they want because they didn't say it. Right. And then they learn this through play. So we need to play with our children. And that I think Nolene will talk about. But children really, play is the work of childhood. Children need to play. We can also bring this in by following a child's lead a lot. So we take the time to observe our children, see what they're busy doing, and then we bring in communication and requesting and talking and modeling with what they are interested in the moment. This helps with the joint attention as well. And lastly, repetition. Again, we're bored, they're not. So we have to keep using the same words, the same phrases over and over and over again. Okay. All right, then we've got sensory motor. Okay. So in terms of sensory motor, this is speech. I need to have a sip of water. Hold on. Is everyone still with me?
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys okay?
Yes.
Are you alive? Okay. So there's a lot that goes into speech. If we have a look at the physical side of things, the speech muscles and the coordination of the muscles is one side of speech development. But we also have speech motor planning, which happens in the brain, which is where the brain sends messages to the tongue and the lips and the jaw and the lungs and everything to say what they must do when. All right. Children with autism can have difficulties with both of these. Okay? Not every child has, but some do. In terms of the motor side, the muscles themselves, we do see a high incidence of children who are picky eaters, and it's the same muscles that you use to chew and move the bolus around with your tongue. You need those muscles to speak. So we have a lot of children who prefer to only eat soft foods. And when you are only eating soft foods, you are not using the muscles of your jaw. And that leads to lower muscle tone, which can affect the ability of all of these muscles to actually move the way they're supposed to for speech. Okay. Also, we have a lot of children with bruxism, which is grinding or clenching. And that has two parts to it. So on the one hand, if you're always like this, you're not going to learn how to move all of the muscles, right? So that's why I can't do my job without Leanne. You cannot get to the communication if the sensory processing is not sorted as well. It's very important to have both. On the other hand, there's a feedback loop with speech. So I move the muscles, my brain sends a message to the muscles to move, and then I have sensory receptors in my mouth that sends a message back to the brain to say, okay, we moved like this. The brain integrates it with your hearing to say, when I did this, it made the sound. And then mommy said more, and then it was wonderful, so I'm going to do this again. If a child has difficulties processing that sensory information through their mouth, they might not be getting that feedback loop as well, which means it's going to take them longer to figure out how to make that sound again. All right. On the other hand, we also have planning difficulties, where the message kind of gets scrambled for how everything needs to move. And this is called apraxia of speech. So, shockingly, there's up to 65% of children with autism may present with apraxia of speech. It's a very high number. It's much lower for non-autistic children. And a child with apraxia of speech typically can learn to speak, but will take very long to do so. There are some children who will not be able to speak verbally, and then we use only alternative and augmentative communication systems. But most children with apraxia of speech will be able to learn to speak, but it will take them a very long time because it takes really long for them to cement a specific motor plan. To learn that when I close my lips and the air comes out my nose and I turn on my voice, it makes a every single time they do it in a different way. And so it is difficult for them to actually learn that sound specifically. So that then brings me on to AAC, which is alternative and augmentative communication. So alternative and augmentative communication is alternative being not speaking, so this is replacing speech, and augmentative being helping speech, aiding speech, right? These are systems and strategies that we can use to actually help our children learn to speak, believe it or not, but also for children with very severe apraxia of speech or muscular difficulties to actually become their voice eventually. And we don't know which children will need it forever and which children will need it for a little while. That is something that time tells, but it is never too early to start because AAC gives children language. It gives them the opportunity to express themselves. And that reduces their frustration level, and when the frustration level is less, it's easier for them to learn the tricky things like the speech. Okay, so now we can take this off. This is my last one. So we have what we call low-tech and high-tech. This terrible situation of going here with these things is low-tech today. So low-tech is things that don't require technology, so gestures, right? Facial expressions, writing or drawing, spelling to communicate, which I will talk about, and then pointing to photos, pictures, communication boards, okay? We have been doing low-tech at the school until it comes out of our ears, okay? And I just want to quickly do a word on spelling to communicate because there were some questions about that in the forms. So spelling to communicate is a very specific intervention type. We don't do it here at school. You have to be specifically trained in it, and it relies on an aid that holds up a board with letters and teaches the child to point to specific letters. So it is an alternative therapy. It's different to AAC on its own, or speech therapy, or occupational therapy. The American Speech and Hearing Association has got an entire page on the internet dedicated to why they don't like spelling to communicate. They say that it relies too much on this one aid and the child learns to only communicate with the one person. And there isn't evidence that shows that the messages, especially in the beginning, are of the child themselves, because there's a lot of hand-over-hand facilitation. So in neurodiversity affirming practice, which is what we do, we try to avoid hand-over-hand as much as possible because it's felt by autistic adults that it takes away autonomy, right? So for that reason, most speech therapists don't do spelling to communicate. There is a lot of families that have come out and said that spelling to communicate have unlocked communication for their children. And there are a lot of doctors here in Pretoria who are also referring to spelling to communicate. So at the end of the day, I can't say that these parents who are saying that it worked for their children are lying, right? There's lots of conflicting information, and it will be up to each and every family to decide what they want to do in terms of the spelling to communicate. But it's not something that we will do at school because we will rather use other AAC systems. Okay. On the flip side, we have high-tech AAC systems. So you have specific speech-generating devices which are made for this. They're actually starting to phase out quite a bit because you also have tablets. Tablets with programs, and there are lots of free programs, and most programs now are made for Apple and Android. And then once you see a program that really works, you can buy the proper version of it. So most people now are using the tablets instead of the speech-generating devices. So how the high-tech works is it actually speaks. So you can have a communication board. I'm sorry, I should have brought one now. I'm silly of me. You can have a communication board with pictures that the child points to, and then the adult says the word. But with a high-tech, you have a tablet, and when the child points on it, there's a voice that comes out of the tablet that says the word. So it's the same thing. What's nice is with high-tech, you can actually move between pages. So when they click on this, it opens up a bunch of other pictures. Then they have all their fruit. And then if they click on this, it opens up a bunch of other pictures, and then they have all their meat. So there's a lot more vocabulary that you can add in a high-tech system, right? Something to kind of know with a high-tech though is if you want to go that route, you need to have insurance because the children will break the tablets, alright? You need to have like a proper silicone case with the strap. You need to have a screen protector. That thing may not have anything else on it. It cannot have YouTube, it cannot have Netflix, it cannot have Miss Rachel, it cannot have games. That device is only the child's voice. You do get something called guided access, where the parent puts in a password and they can't go out of the app. In my experience, the kids throw the tablets because they know that Miss Rachel is here and they can't get to it, and it frustrates them. And if there's anything that triggers a child, it's screen time. Okay, so if you decide to do this, maybe get a second tablet then. Okay. There are a lot of different programs, and each child would need a different number of pictures. Some kids can cope with 24 pictures that are really tiny, and they can find the right one, and this has to do with visual discrimination. Other kids have to start off with 2. So you need to speak to your therapist about which program are we doing and how are we starting this and that sort of thing. Okay, it's not a one-size-fits-all, oh, everyone with autism does well with this, let's use this. Okay, definitely not. But at the end of the day, all of this is contributing to helping our children learn to communicate, alright? We are going to have a chat about introducing more high-tech at school this year, which is very exciting. We're hoping from the second term to have a lot more high-tech options at school. So we'll be able to then integrate into home as well, so that we have the same systems. So that if you have a device at home, that we're using the same thing, but it would be better not to have the home devices at school. Okay. Yes, so that's me. So if we have a look then, it was a bit of a mouthful. I don't know if there's any questions. Is there time for a question? Yeah, if there are any questions, I'm here. And yours.
Another question, just observation, is the predominant question is always from a parent's side, when will my child talk? When will my child speak? But you covered it in so beautifully that there's so many things that you take into account. And it's a whole process.
Leanne and I saw a little boy for 3 years, 4 years.
A long time.
A very long time. And he said his first words at 8. And he's now speaking.
But he did start to speak.
Other children will go through those stages very quickly and they'll start speaking at 3. I've learned not to say to a preschool child, oh, it doesn't look like they're going to be verbal. Because they surprise us. And we do get children with intense apraxia of speech, and in those cases, yes, then we need to get them onto like a really robust AAC system. But at this age, at preschool age, we cannot say yet, no, it's not going to happen. Okay, we need to, but we need to give our children the tools to be able to communicate with us while it's working. That's what's nice about AAC, is we don't want frustrated children. And remember, speech is not the only circle. We want them to be able to connect socially with others, and we want them to be able to grow their language because it grows their thinking. So we can use AAC to help with that. It's not replacing the talking. It's helping the whole system mature and giving them a means to communicate while the talking is developing.
I just want to add to that parenting in itself is stressful enough. Parenting kids with extra needs, even more so. So as a therapist, I just want to encourage you. No pressure on you, neither from your side to your child. Trust the process. When our kids are little and some therapies are told for your kids specifically, go do this, go see someone there, it's because it's part of the process. The younger they are, when we put things in place, the better for them. But it's stressful enough, so don't get yourself freaked out about that. Trust the process. Do the therapy as is pointed to you or indicated for you as a family to go do. And then watch the space, watch your child's face. Let them surprise you. But let that not be your main source of stress, because there's enough other things in life to stress.
So, Nadine said now like doing the therapy, so you'll see we've been working a lot on like books. And we're trying to get kids to point to pictures in books. Why are we doing that? To get them to point to pictures on communication boards. Okay? We're doing a lot of songs. We want the kids to do the gestures of the songs. Why are we doing that? To get to the low-tech gestures for AAC. All of the things that we're doing are actually AAC related. But if you do them, and if, remember I keep speaking about repetition, if the kids are, every time it's time to brush teeth, they're getting the sign, you're singing this is the way we brush our teeth, eventually your child is going to do that as well. So we just have to keep at it and keep repeating. Good.
We're going to have a quick break. It's going to be 15 minutes.